The King of Podcasts Radio Network proudly presents the Wrestling is Real podcast, because wrestling needs us. Wrestling is Real podcast is back on. Thanks for being here. King of Podcasts here with you. I'm recording tonight. It is Christmas Eve, midnight or so. I just finished watching AEW Dynamite. I gotta say this too. Number one, finally get my new microphone. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you like the sound, the sibilance that comes from it. I paid a pretty penny for it, and the idea is that I wanted to have something that was better than I have had before, so I brought this in. Here it is. I hope you enjoy it. It's the Joe Rogan microphone, basically, but it is a version. Well, for some of you podcast aficionados out there, you know, you'll want to know that it's the Shure MV7. That's what I bought. So this is the USB version, but of course I can plug in XLR or USB if I want to, whichever I prefer. So I wanted to get this, and this I was able to do thanks to all the ad revenue that came out this year from the program, which I am thankful for all of you that might have contributed to this part by listening to the show and listening to all the commercials that might have been in between. I'm so thankful that you did. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing that, because then you allowed me to go ahead and do what I said I was going to do. I said I was going to go ahead and upgrade on the production equipment, so I bought new editing software. Already had that rolling last week, or actually a couple weeks ago, and then I went ahead and got the microphone. I was just waiting for it in the mail. It showed up a week late, but nevertheless, thank you, U.S. Postal Service. It finally showed up. Got it on Monday, got to use it for a couple shows, including my When I'm Not Podcasting series, which I'm really so far ahead of that series. If you haven't listened to it, I talk about a lot of things that is besides wrestling and Broadcasters Podcast, which is my media podcast. So anything on dating, anything on what I do for Uber on the side hustle. I'll talk about, you know, different things when it comes to debauchery or dating, or, you know, whatever things I think just pop in mind. OnlyFans I like to go and pick on. Pornhub I like to pick on sometimes. So I got all those kind of stories all lining up. Future episodes, you can actually catch it just about every other day. About 4 days a week I put episodes of When I'm Not Podcasting, my short form series. You can find that over at kingofpodcasts.com, or just look for the show, When I'm Not Podcasting. Find it wherever you find this show, which is, of course, Amazon, Apple, Google, Spotify, iHeartRadio. Just pick it. It's out there. You can find it. So go ahead and do that for yourselves. With that said, let's move along. There are people out there in the mainstream corporate entities of the world that do media. They don't bother taking the time to spend giving all of you content. So there's reruns and there's these specials and all and things like that. And you know what? People don't really care for that. Really, think about it. I mean, are you watching a lot of television? And then also with the movies and the TV shows that we have right now, if they go to reruns on network or cable, or they take time off if they're on cable, then the other thing is, you might have been watching Netflix, you might have been catching some movies and this and that here and there, but again, you're probably getting a little fatigue on streaming because you've streamed so much this year, and you are basically just picking mediocre stuff as you're at it. So to give yourself something to do, because you're going to be running around during Christmas time, you're going to be doing something to keep yourself occupied throughout the Christmas time, New Year's time. You don't have YouTube videos you might want to be able to watch because people take time off from that too. Well, podcasters like me are smart enough to know I'm the kind of person that wants to keep listening to stuff throughout, because I'm going to be in the car. I'm going to be doing things. I might be working out. Who knows? But I want to have something to listen to throughout my day. And I can only listen to Audible for so much. I can only listen to other YouTube shows for so much. Just can't do any of that stuff. Now, the one thing that is what is because there's just not much news going on now. We are at the lull of the wrestling season. We'll have WrestleMania season coming up in about 3 weeks. Some good things going on with AEW. They're keeping their momentum up. They got some good specialty programming going on right now. WWE right now is in a rough spot, and we're going to tie that into my fourth part of my year review for 2020, which will be focusing on WrestleMania going on into the year where WWE had to go ahead and do all their work from the Performance Center and how they handled it. and the managed decline of WWE's programming and their ratings and all the things that were going with it. We're going to go through the layoffs. Obviously, they'll be a part of that as well. So much going on. It's just the year has been filled with a lot of things. And, of course, just getting to part 4. I'm not even finished yet. I'm going to have to try to cover as much as I can next week in part 5 to wrap things up. It's just a lot. So do understand that I am here, and one of the things that really do make me feel excited is that I have the new microphone I can talk into, and I know it's going to sound great. And I also have content still to go ahead and record. If I had more stuff to record, I would. I just have to keep looking for stories to talk about. I have to keep looking for other things. Now, there's no more post shows they're going to give. This probably will just be this episode. We'll do this tonight, and then I'll have one more episode to finish off. That'll be leading up into the 30th, and that'll be it for this year, and then we just move along. So that's what I want to do with that. Meantime, we wait 2 weeks for Wrestle Kingdom, which comes up over 2 nights, and that'll be in Tokyo. And then we'll have Impact Wrestling's Hard to Kill, which has a good card already getting built up right now. And then Royal Rumble is January 31st. So January is a very exciting month in wrestling. And remember, we have a lot of wrestling that's come back, which we could talk about as well. I'll say this, when it comes to the other programming, Impact Wrestling, they're kind of just working through the motion. What has been the most important thing going on right now with their show is the Kenny Omega Good Brothers kind of nuance right there. And people are watching the show. While Access TV is getting some audience, they're not getting that full-fledged boost for people watching it on the first run or the repeat on cable on Access TV. They're definitely watching on Twitch, and they're watching the YouTube channels and other places. They're definitely catching the show. So good for them. Good on them. They said about 750,000 people actually caught the show this past week through all their different platforms. That's good. It's something significant to talk about how people are watching the show. It just doesn't reflect on their cable ratings because I don't know if there's enough people that actually go ahead and go over to Access TV to watch. And also if they're watching on a Tuesday night. So we're not sure where to go there. Again, we're AEW. Good stuff. They continue to be consistent in their programming. And with WWE, it's just not so much. It's been disappointing. By the way, I'll say NWA, I'm glad that it came back on. I have enjoyed the Shockwave episodes that they were putting out. That's good stuff. And MLW is right back where it was. So it's good stuff right now. Contra Unit's now on the play. And Jacob Fatu losing a lot of weight. He just looks badass as a champion. I'm just surprised how long he's going to be able to stay around there. Just read that Mance Warner's going to be leaving. Well, we'll see if somebody else wants to pick him up somewhere down the line. If somebody will look at him as a free agent, or unless he might be a little bit too much to deal with in the locker room. I'm not sure what the whole deal behind it was and where he comes into it. But again, he's more of a hardcore star. Is that a guy that still fits the part in other places? And he's really considered too much of a Stone Cold Steve Austin throwback. Because it does feel like that somewhat, but it is kind of like that. Somewhat to a way. Now, that's where we're with the other shows. But now it's time to talk about the Major League. For how long they're going to be in Major League, I don't know. Because they're in a rebuilding mode and they haven't figured things out yet. And obviously the Raw show is suffering greatly. So now they just threw a lifeline. In 2 weeks, they're going to have the Legends night. To bring those guys back for one night, just to pop a rating, of course, we know that's not enough. Now, they're going to have to figure something out. Now, they could say, oh, well, we're going to get a little bump of the ratings because football is going to be done. Because football is basically moving on the playoffs now. So I'm not going to worry about that. They will be worrying about the national championship and other bowl games that will be going on between now and January 6th. Or January 4th, excuse me. So they'll have, January 11th. Because January 11th will be the national title game. So college football is going to be in a play. They're going to have football still to deal with for another 4 weeks. 3 weeks. 3 weeks. They'll have that to worry about. And then what? I mean, really ask yourself, what is it that you have left now that you have to be worrying about? There's no quick fix to the situation. But to look at the situation, of course, we could go back 10 years to the problems that this company has had. Okay? We can actually go back 20 years. But it's been pretty obvious when you look at it more than anything else. It's not far-fetched for me to say that this company has lived off its laurels. The heyday of conquering WCW in 2001. And again, March 26th will be the 20th anniversary of it. 20 years to live off that legacy, to live off the Attitude Era. That's commendable. I don't know a lot of other companies or a lot of other people that can really live off of that. It's like soap operas that are able to stay around with the heyday of their shows. But ask yourself the question, how many things do we see out there now that have been able to sustain themselves on their legacy that started in 2000? I mean, can you think of anything? The Kardashians didn't even start by then, but they lasted themselves all the way up to 2021. And I think they started in 2005. So again, there are 16 years for that. Is there anything else we had that was current or anything that was just viral and hot at the time that really brought us there? I mean, think about that. You can't think of much that really has done that. Anything that's really lived off of one legacy and it just kept people watching and kept a cult following. That's the question. I can't think of many things like that. Well, The Simpsons. I'm not kidding. The Simpsons, Family Guy, those are two shows, animated shows that I think they're well past their prime. And, you know, their heyday, well, The Simpsons was the 90s. Family Guy was the early 2000s. And they were gone for 4 years and came back by popular demand. So you got that going for you. South Park, maybe? I mean, again, you have your viral ability, and then you have a show that just continues on and on and on. It's not getting better. There's nothing new being added to the mix. They're just replacing things that they need to just to fill the roles. That's it. This company has a constant pipeline of bringing in new stars on a regular basis. They're capable of doing that. Now, this is a continuation from my diatribe that I had on the post show for TLC, because I went about a good 20 minutes on that, and I feel like we're going to continue on to that role right here as I go into the year in review part 4. But it is true. This company, they don't have the kind of, well, I mean, there's a lot of things you could say that kind of precluded this. But again, they're getting better broadcast deals than ever. We've seen that. I mean, for all the managed decline of the creative of this roster, the growth has not been in the talent. It has not been in the ring. The growth has been from the corporate sense, from being able to monetize all this. By creating a pipeline in order to polish and to get talent on board with the Performance Center, the WWE Network. Okay? The deal they struck with Saudi Arabia, the broadcast deals they made to make themselves such a legitimate organization. We do remember they're getting in excess of what, over $300 million a year. Okay, they're getting a lot of money, and these are 5-year deals. Sports franchises sports leagues. This isn't the same level as them. Because remember the last time we dealt with this, you know, they were worried about, it was in 2014 when we were doing this show, we talked about how they were struggling because Vince McMahon had a real thought process that even at that time, and the wrestling was not horrible at that point. Like, they were still putting pretty good numbers at that point. And they were still getting 4 million viewers at that point. You're thinking about the fact that, again, there was no other competition but them. And they were still dealing with Monday Night Football. And they were still dealing with other things. And a lot of their stars in the Attitude Era had already gone and, you know, basically gone to either a definite part-time status, very short term, once in a while come over, and that's it. So living off of part-timers and having a couple new stars that actually kind of had something they were like living off of as well. Remember, I'll give credit where there's credit due. It's not as if the company hasn't done a couple things to try to continue to get stars that would be able to go and keep this legacy growing. It's not like they didn't have certain stars coming in and have done well. But you think about the fact that Attitude Era, they did somewhat accomplish getting new stars ready to go. It took them until roughly 2005 to get there. In roughly 2006, 2007, you started living off those stars. You had Batista, John Cena, Brock Lesnar, who only stayed for so long. And then you still had Undertaker still moving along and doing things. And that's where you were. But now, and the Rey Mysterio was around. You still had Mankind. You know, there was just still some stars that were still around into up to the 2010s. And so that decade, you still had somewhat of a semblance, but it was a decline. It was starting to decline because you were going to be able to sustain, number one, the audience that you had out there. Okay? It was going to take a little bit of a hit. Now, for WWE, they could have done better in the second end of the 2000s, that decade. 2010s, their problem is that social media, and then the second half of the 2010s was streaming, literally just started eating up their audience. Now, instead of what they did in the 2000s, where they were able to get John Cena, Randy Orton, Brock Lesnar, Batista, having a nucleus of stars who were building off of there, and having them run as main eventers for a while, right? So you had that going for you, sure. But then the decisions to be made to continue to keep this show going and doing well, WWE Network, 2014. Yeah, can you believe we're already going to get to 6 years of this network already? Time has flown. So you got that going for you. And then, you know, they were trying to get the broadcast deal kind of solidified to get some more money coming in. Well, what happened was when they knew they were not going to get the kind of money that they needed to really sustain the broadcast money they wanted, they needed more money to keep things rolling like they are. So the network offered them a guaranteed pipeline of revenue. But the risk of that was a major detriment to what was going on with them, the pay-per-views. And to be honest with ourselves, when we watch shows like TLC or Clash of Champions, some of these B shows, when really we're only getting the best of what we really want from from a WrestleMania or a Royal Rumble, you know, you couldn't see yourself buying these pay-per-views now at $55 and $65 each, could you? Or even at a higher price. You couldn't see yourself paying that now. I mean, not to mention that the company doesn't even do anything to even, you know, create value to the feuds so that when you get to that point. So we are getting what we pay for. By still paying $10 a month, they have not even changed the price on it yet. For them to go ahead and start putting the price up on us for the quality of the content on television to lead us into the pay-per-views, they can't do it. They could do it for the big four shows, potentially, but they can't do that across the board. And that's where we get the detriment. Because the pay-per-views, you know, you have to be able to do something to make people go out of their way to pay $50, $60 for a pay-per-view when you're twice or three times as much as most other wrestling pay-per-views. I must say this, for the credit of the other wrestling companies, they've all learned from WWE. Okay, Impact only does 4 main shows a year. They might be charging $40 or $50 each, but they are putting out very good shows on pay-per-view. AEW, the same thing. They're putting out $50 shows, but yet you're getting them 4 times a year, and those are huge. Okay, they just do a good job of those, period. And their TV shows absolutely do a great job. But again, Impact, they all do a great job, absolutely, of building up to pay-per-views. NWO is doing the same thing, also doing 3 to 4 shows a year. Same idea. That's the whole thing. So they're still doing the pay-per-view model, and they might have, like Impact does their own streaming service and all, and they're doing these shows now where they're doing every month, but also they're doing somewhat of a job of booking those shows because that's the model that has to work. Why WWE has lost that model is beyond me. I don't understand why they lost that, but that's the whole point of this. The business model got tweaked. And because the emphasis of the pay-per-views are not so much, again, they just need to fill the pay-per-view with matches. Really, you might only have 1 or 2 matches that really do put to a particular price point that are worth the $10. This last pay-per-view TLC, I would say that the Drew McIntyre AJ Styles match definitely gave you the money's worth. The Roman Reigns Kevin Owens match definitely gave you the money's worth. I would give Carmella Sasha Banks probably contributed to that as well. Other than that, again, we get a lot of matches that might just be, prominent events in the 8, 9, or 10 o'clock hour of Raw. Or prominent matches on SmackDown. Maybe even main events. But there's no prestige behind those main events or the build-ups to any matches when you can just start a matchup whenever you want. Without any rhyme or reason. As long as there's some kind of confrontation, we just need an insta-feud. We just need to get it started. And then if we have feuds, we're just going to continue to have those stars work with each other. They're going to have the same dancing partners. God forbid we have other dancing partners for them. You get what I mean? Other wrestlers to work with aside, right? They don't have that going for them. So you'll have certain wrestlers are going to work with each other. That's it. And they're going to keep working with each other until they decide not to. It's a very boring and basic way of booking. And it's stupid. And it's not good. So it doesn't make sense why they're doing it this way, but they are. And I don't like it at all. It's just not suitable. So either which way, they have that going on. And it's not good. But this is the model been going on for a long time. And why is it that Vince wants it this way? I don't know. Part of the reason is because there's not a lot of people in creative that might have, I have to say this too. Something's got to be said about some of the writers that might have pushed back and might have had a good sense of how to book and how to create shows. Okay, when you had people like Krista Joseph or Court Bauer or Alex Greenfield, and you had certain writers in the 2000s and the 2010s, and you see what they're doing on separate shows, okay, for the credit, Court Bauer's doing a great job of booking MLW. Now, I used to always talk about, let's see about him, but I must say, he does a damn good job of booking with the talent he has and the kind of show that he has. It's pretty well done. There's some compelling stuff there. Imagine if that guy had a budget. That's my point. Look at Krista Joseph of Lucha Underground. Look at that show. Look at how that was booked. Now, were the matches complete? Was it everything working on all cylinders? Maybe not, but I mean, hell, there was a lot of creativity behind that show. They just weren't very supernatural. They might have just gone a little bit off the deep end towards the end. But for what it's worth, they're putting together a show that was really compelling. And it was quite interesting. And for a couple of years, I was totally hooked on it. They were doing the right job of it. And that's what they do. But right now, you just got to ask yourself, what's going on now? Who is there in that company doing anything? Remember, Freddie Prinze was actually working with these guys in the creative team? You don't even have... you got some of the wrestlers that used to try to work on this. Remember Edge and Daniel Bryan would try to contribute a little bit to it? Or that you had, just other people that were involved. And the creative people they have there now, regardless of their background, their ability to write and ability to position or debate for storylines to get through. Some of them probably don't get a chance to do that. And if they do, if we do get storylines that get kind of interesting, look what happened this year. One of the writers that created the Otis Mandy Rose storyline, which was actually kind of compelling, was actually an interesting storyline. In the middle of the writing of the storyline, she gets let go. Right? And then it got brought back later, but still, what are you doing there? The creative team feels expendable. At any time, they can be let go. You can't work in this environment. We've talked about the creative room before. I know we talked about it on the program, and we'll get to that in a minute. But again, these things have been going on for a long time. The creative room has suffered a lot. You know, they've gone through lead writers, and there are just people that are around that it's not working. They have to be complete yes people. And if they're even working on things, they're so concerned about not trying to deviate into focus groups and working on mid-card, feuds or working on other things. There's that part that's not working. And there's also the booking itself. Besides the creative, this is where Dave Meltzer, Brian Alvarez are right about this too. The booking of the matches, the logic is wrong. They're doing that wrong as well. Look at how Drew McIntyre got booked. Look at how Kevin Owens got booked to TLC. They're absolutely right about that. Why do you do things like that? Why are the baby faces booked so bad? So the Wrestling Observer guys get that point. They're making the right point. And then when you look at the rest of the whole dynamic, there's just so many things. Remember, the 24/7 title, it should be booked how the hardcore title was. But remember, when you have none of these guys mean anything at all to this, then the title is what it is. The mid-card titles, they just get thrown on the people as props. Nothing much else. The King of the Ring has felt like that. That's why Corbin's still holding on to that crown. Otherwise, what else is there the King of the Ring for? Again, it's just if it's a gimmick that's needed for the time. I'm surprised they haven't brought it back at this point because they're hurting right now. They're not doing tournaments. They're not doing anything to help build things up. Well, they don't need it right now because they have some strong stars with the belts. Most of their title holders on the main event front are strong. Okay, Drew McIntyre, Roman Reigns, Sasha Banks, Asuka, they're strong title holders. And the truth is, those title holders right now, there's no reason for them to go and drop those belts. But then again, there is nobody. So you have those four things right there done. Okay, and what do I say all the time? We always talk about how can we get a few other people to vouch to go ahead and compete for the title, but we're not. There should be multiple people going after each of these main event titles, but we don't know any of them that are, and there is nobody being built up to do that right now. Okay? Now, we could say that Roman Reigns, he might have a future title shot when it comes to Big E. Maybe he'll come down the line and he'll make the step up. We never know. We don't know if, on the Raw side, I don't think Riddle or Matt or Keith Lee, I don't think either of those two guys are going to be set up, but you could have done something to build those guys up and give them some heat, give them some rub, but nobody wants to do that. No, we're getting Riddle with Bro Nuts. We're getting Keith Lee brought up in the storyline now with Sheamus. I guess that's where they want to build things up. First of all, you put him into a title picture, and then you bring him down. For what? Why are you going to drag people down and then build them back up? It's like, okay, make them lose, bring them back up. No streaks. Nobody can get a hot feud going. Nobody can have a hot streak and come in like Goldberg. I don't expect that. But again, we can't do anything significant to come and build that back up. And these are the problems that they constantly have. Booking, creative, it's constant here. Let's look into the show, into the year that was, and kind of fall back more into it. And if you, again, just look at the list of episodes if you want and follow along with me, and we'll just keep talking about it. Now, we can talk about WrestleMania and how well it did. And I mentioned that when you look at the amount of sponsorships and partnerships that the company had going in, they had no choice but to keep it going. They could lose the gate in the merchandise sales, but not the pay-per-view money, the subscribers, nor let the broadcast partners in their dire need of content. And that was the idea of that. So I understood that part of things. I didn't complain about that. I don't think anybody else did either. But they did that. We had the Firefly Funhouse match, which was pretty good with John Cena. We had that really led off the first night. Second night, we really led off with the Boneyard match, which was fantastic. You really couldn't say much. It was just a couple of matches that really just stood out. Good stuff, Kevin Owens and Seth Rollins. You know, they had good matches across the board. Not bad at all. So we could talk about that. WrestleMania was a good point. Drew becoming champion, beating Brock Lesnar. Great moment. We could relish on WrestleMania 36. They did a pretty damn good job. We learned a couple things from that. Okay, we did make Drew a star, which he could have been a long time ago. But him being humbled, being let go, and basically just being thrown out, finding his way back. I mean, how much of a fall is it on Drew, and how much of it is it on the company? Who's to blame? Well, I'm sure Drew will take some of it. The company will take some of it. But again, Drew McIntyre was a guy they always had their eye on. Well, they were right about him. That's why he's now champion and he's over as he is. He would be over now. We already know that. We were starting to see that before the crowds had to be let go and we couldn't get him back out because of COVID. We already know that the crowd was behind him. So, and they continue to add things to him. He's got this Roddy Piper kind of thing going to him now. He's out in the kilt again. Like, the whole package of Drew McIntyre is very good. In a very similar way to Roman Reigns, except there's a weakness in his opponents. And I'm not knocking AJ Styles, and I'm not knocking The Miz. But we know that AJ Styles, the way he's been booked, I don't see him, somebody is being booked to go ahead and take the belt off of him. But AJ Styles is always going to be sniffing around the main event because that's just how good he is. But again, he's also up there in age. So how long can he continue a full-time roster run? I don't think he can do that. I think AJ Styles eventually is going to start going to, I mean, probably doesn't have to do it now because of the way the show is. But once we get back to live shows or house shows again, where they're going to have to go out multiple times a week, I don't know where AJ Styles or Daniel Bryan, for that matter as well, if they go into anything more than a part-time status. We already know Randy Orton's there right now. But again, these guys are working as they are. So we're getting full-time work from them right now. But are they really helping those shows? Well, we're not seeing it. It's pretty obvious. So moving along. WrestleMania, we saw how things were going, and it was really good to see that wrestling was going to continue during COVID-19. It was really the detriment of the state of Florida, saying that it was essential, some of the productions being done. Now, people can go ahead and complain all they want that we shouldn't have had wrestling during this time, that the shutdown was supposed to happen. But again, I was really so thankful that even though AEW had to stop production, WWE and Impact Wrestling continue to keep taping. And they've been running this whole format now for a while. So they all found their ways to go ahead and find a workaround. All of them did it. Now, for Impact Wrestling and AEW, it didn't make much of a difference because they were just taping away. Impact Wrestling would just tape 4 shows or wherever venue they were at, whether it was in Canada or Mexico or somewhere in the States. So they kept doing that. AEW was going from town to town, but just for their Dynamite shows. And that was good. And then, of course, WWE had the house shows all over the place. Their normal schedule, the normal tour. With all that being shut down, we were not with UFC. We were without baseball, basketball, hockey, XFL, golf, tennis, all the other sports were all shut down for several months. But before they can get themselves off the ground, the only type of sports-related type of content we had was wrestling. Professional wrestling was on the map to the credit of all these wrestling companies. And for that, I am grateful. I will continue to say that we should all be grateful for what they contributed this year. The wrestling companies came through. WWE, Impact Wrestling, AEW, and when the other companies like MLW and NWA and Ring of Honor were not able to come back right away, that they were able to go and just use the content they had, and they found ways to continue to keep themselves active and current and relevant. Credit to them. Hey man, when MLW ran out of episodes in May, what are we going to do next? Well, let's start showing underground episodes. NWA, let's find something else to do with the wrestlers. God bless them. They did a great job. Carney Land was a great, fun idea. They're now back with Shockwave. They're using some of the content, repurposing it for what they're doing, what they were doing with Global Wrestling Network. Great stuff. I give all the credit in the world for all these guys for what they were able to do. It's good. And then you move along and say AEW did find a way to continue putting content out there. They had to work out of one venue for a while in an undisclosed location, which was great. And then Daly's Place became their venue du jour. Great. Performance Center got used for a number of months. And then eventually we get to the Thunderdome. We'll talk about that definitely in probably the next episode coming up for part 5 when I do the show next week. That was great. All this was great. Impact Wrestling also found a way to continue putting out content. You know, wrestling, we were lucky as fans to have it. So with WWE, we always said there was going to be a work of a lot of things going on with some of the things that were going on. There were going to be a lot of issues. We already knew. When it comes to just trying to get things back up and going. And we knew that with the way the shows are going to be presented, we were going to have to get used to it without crowds. Now we're used to it where it's just kind of like what it is. But for the most part, you know, we watch WWE shows with a piped-in crowd and we see the people on monitors like Running Man. Fine. We've gotten used to it. And we didn't even have that before. We just had the Performance Center. We had, you know, what they were doing in there and what it was. AEW would just have their wrestlers come out and offer some noise and a little bit of ambiance to their shows. Impact Wrestling has had no audience, not even piped in, nothing throughout their whole duration. Same thing for MLW now, same thing for Ring of Honor. They've all done the same kind of format. Let's just put them on a stage, put the ring in, we'll just figure out how to do it from there. It'll be enough for people to go and watch the action. And it's worked. For the most part, people are still watching wrestling. Not as much because people have really gotten to the point where they don't want to go and sit around watching cable, flipping to other channels where they're all doing virtual and Zoom calls on every show, or just rerunning shows we've seen over and over. So remember, you know, the other detriment you got to think about is that more people were leaving cable during the time of March, April, and May and going directly to streaming, because then the streaming services became more and more than ever more prominent. So Netflix, Disney Plus debuted. Then you had Peacock. Then you had HBO Max. All these different services coming out with new product, new content. And you know what? Cable might have taken a backseat. And it very well did. Because nobody was wanting to watch the news and be bored and be depressed and angry or sad or panicked or whatever. You know, you don't want to watch that. You don't want to hear this, we're in this together kind of stuff. You want to start watch stuff that kind of feels like normal. You don't want to be thought about the pandemic. Sometimes people want to go and watch television or movies to escape. So to see shows coming back now on network TV where the masks are on and they're doing the social distancing, or watching shows now on stage where they're doing social distancing. You know, some people don't want to watch that. And some people don't want to go and look at that and start, you know, thinking about their own lives. They don't want to have that. They want this to be an escape. Again, sports entertainment. We want to be entertained without thinking about what's going on outside. Because some people have more lockdown than others. Again, here in Florida, we're very blessed. We're not so much. We got masks. Other than that, we're doing pretty well. We're doing like almost normal. Some other places don't get that so much. New York, California, other countries, Canada, UK. All my brothers to the UK and the into the north, I'm sure you're dealing with a lot of lockdowns and restrictions as well, and you don't like that. Sure, I don't like it either. Nobody does. But what it comes down to is we were all kind of adjusting and adapting to everything. So there was going to be a while that wrestling was going to get a curve. And that was fine. But all they had to really need to do for this part, for the duration, is just not continue to decline so much. So there's a pass that's given to the WWE for a while, and I think a lot of people did give them that pass. Of course, the IWC is still going to be very critical because it's just the way, that's just the nature of the IWC. But we kept moving along. Moving on to April 23rd. Overall pandemic and lockdown, decisions could have been avoided and not forced WWE's hand. So Money in the Bank was all coming up. Double or Nothing was coming up at that time. Moving along into May, we talked about how WWE was on autopilot. And the AEW continued to give out great programming. And AEW being very constructive. Because also, remember, AEW didn't have all the talent. And that was another thing. A number of people, we wouldn't have all the talent out there. There were certain people that couldn't get along to go ahead and travel easily to get over to what they were doing. Remember that. We had a lot of issues with that. And that was one of the things that came up with. One of the things that WWE did do as well that also helped a lot has been doing the cinematic matches. And they started working off of that pretty well. And it was interesting how they did it. You know, there were a couple of times they did it, and it was quite interesting. But again, they're memorable. And I think they found another dynamic that could really work for their pay-per-views to make them viable. You know, for them to do that, it's very important. It really works out for them to do some of the stuff they're doing. Now, moving into May, one of the true signs of somebody that's going to have a true future ahead of him, if they do right by him, was when Karrion Kross came out with Scarlett in NXT back in May. And I said that WWE has been more than capable of making a great entrance for a wrestler. Kross's gimmick this season has been ready-made for the main event for any wrestling card. It's on Killer Kross now to fight the fight against the corporate WWE firewall that has failed more talented wrestlers than it has flourished in well over a decade. And I believe Karrion Kross actually liked that post. Or it was not that, it was another one. Now, we know, unfortunately, he had an injury shortly after he won the title at an NXT TakeOver, and now he's finally back, and now he's getting into feuds coming up now, and I guess he'll probably have some appearance at New Year's Eve coming up next week. So there's that. And NXT, for Karrion Kross, he's the reason to watch NXT right now. That's the fresh face. But the truth is, I mean, they're going to probably keep him on NXT, but talk about a boost in the arm for that company. Karrion Kross right now would be an added bonus to a Monday Night Raw. And immediately if you put him up into a feud with Drew McIntyre, I am not kidding. You get that guy to come in and he starts, and you put jobbers in front of Karrion Kross, you let him do that entrance every week, and you just let him beat people up. And then eventually he gets to Drew McIntyre. I'm not kidding. We should do it. That's what should be happening with Karrion Kross. That guy's going to get eyeballs on and attention on him. And you do not have to change the gimmick. You don't have to change anything. Of course, Vince just can't help himself. But I think Triple H and whoever else is back there, Shawn Michaels, these people need to go ahead and lobby to get Karrion Kross pretty soon. After WrestleMania this year, they need to move him up. You have no choice right now. At this moment, you don't have the time to go ahead and build him up on the developmental side. Karrion Kross always said could have been brought right up to the main roster. Plus, I also know he's always going to have the risk of getting screwed up going to the main roster. But for me, I think everybody else can agree with me on this. Karrion Kross, at this dire need of the company, they need somebody else to go ahead and get some interest to Raw. Karrion Kross is it. And book him as an unstoppable force, TikTok, and build him up. And honestly, that's the one that gets replacing Bray Wyatt's spot on the roster. Until you figure out what to do with Bray Wyatt, because you burned him to a crisp, as Brian Alvarez said. Let's just go ahead and get something else done with Bray Wyatt. I don't know. Do something else with him. Change it up. Because maybe the Firefly Funhouse kind of gimmick and the Fiend of Bray Wyatt, they needed to go away, and hopefully it's gone. So if Bray Wyatt wants to go and revolutionize himself, evolve once again, please do. Make him something else. I don't know what, but make him something else. And for what it's worth, let Karrion Kross move up. Now we went into May 10th. Asuka and Otis picking up Money in the Bank briefcases, which I will never understand why Otis got the Money in the Bank briefcase. But again, he was hot at that point. Then I also talked about Tom Segura and the comedian and podcast host making comments on a recent episode of Your Mom's House podcast. We talked about that. That was funny. We talked about after Money in the Bank, how Becky Lynch confirmed that she was already several months pregnant, and not long ago she celebrated the birth. Good for them. It was a great moment to see her relinquishing the women's championship belt to Asuka at the Money in the Bank. It was a hell of a job. So was that. But then again, that means Becky Lynch is going to be gone. And that was a star that was going to be sadly missed on the Raw roster. And there has been nobody that has been able to pick up for where Becky Lynch left off. That was a star that was already a star. I know we were kind of picking on her and complaining about her, but nobody could say anything about the fact that she was definitely there. You know? Then May 12th, we talked about the loss of Shad Gaspard, who got washed ashore in Venice, California, swept away by a rip current while swimming with his 10-year-old son, and was trying to go and rescue his son. Still a sad story, and I think, what was it, the other day, Senator Calciner, I forget who, Kofi, I think it was. Somebody went ahead and did their match in tribute of Shad Gaspard, which was a very nice thing. Double or Nothing came around, crowning the first TNT champion that night. Cody wins over the Murder Hawk Lance Archer. Hikaru Shida became the new AEW Women's Champion over Nyla Rose. So she's held that belt for a while now, 7 months. There we go. We also talked about Hana Kimura, who had died, unfortunately, from suicide, taking her own life. May 27th, around Memorial Day, we talked about the Performance Center and how, remember, we had nobody in the crowd at first. Then they started using the NXT wrestlers. Remember when they did that? And that was a bad mistake. Yeah. Having certain people in the crowd just standing around with masks on and chanting like clapping seals. With plexiglass all over the place. I hated that time of the Performance Center. You know, just to have it do just like all the other shows right now, they had just the empty ring, would have been fine. But doing it with the audience in the pods, like they're still doing that for NXT, and that's why it's still hard to watch that show for me, was really bad. Then June 3rd. And there was so much going on because that was right around the George Floyd murder. Black Lives Matter. So many things going on. The company was trying to go ahead and deal with diversity concerns, among other things. So, again, there was a lot that was going on that was really in a rough point. But so much going on. And then I must have gotten to, obviously was getting into another point where NXT, I just started feeling at this point, and even with Karrion Kross out there, I just started feeling the point where NXT was losing a spot. And again, to keep themselves going after debuting up against head-to-head AEW, to the credit, one of the things that got to be said was, you know, they were trying to find their way and keep things going. But again, pretty tough for them to hope that this show would continue to perform very well against AEW and keep people tuned into it and out program AEW every week. On June 7th, I mentioned how due to a number of factors, it's no longer the upshot developmental brand that most fans found fresh and exciting. Besides destroying Ring of Honor as one of their competitors as a result, NXT's turned into a neutered feeder system with lots of bona fide stars who were already stars in other promotions, has a few prospects that might be able to overcome bad main roster creative to succeed. And you think about that. To the credit Ring of Honor, it did take them more than a year to kind of build themselves back up. Now, they've had some time to have Bandito, to have Rush and Dragon Lee and Shane Taylor and Jonathan Gresham alongside the rest of the roster with a Marty Scurll or the Briscoes or Jay Lethal. I mean, they have a nucleus of stars there, and they're building new stars on top of that. They found their way back, and they've done some things to kind of get themselves back in a spot where they are not so much a rebuilding spot. They're just back at a spot where they are, they found their stars. Again, to the credit of Ring of Honor, they were able to find their way back up, and they've been able to do that every time. I mean, when you lose the Undisputed Era, it was like something out of how, the Radicals going from WCW to WWE, or WWF rather, right? It was the same kind of idea. The super acquiring of all that talent and bringing it over. And then Ring of Honor not able to go ahead and put that much money down to get the rest of their stars, but they were able to go ahead and hold on to a number of stars of theirs and lock them on the contracts. Losing the likes of Keith Lee, losing Punishment Martinez, losing Donovan Dijak. That takes a lot right there. There's a lot to go ahead and try to overcome right there. Not having the New Japan relationship anymore. The company had to go through some things, pissing some people off in AAA and CMLL with the Rush, Bandito, and Dragon Lee stuff going on, right? All that going on as well. There's a lot behind that. But Ring of Honor found their way through. But again, NXT, even with that Ring of Honor talent, all that they were doing, again, they were just pilfering off talent from other rosters to hold back AEW. So it wasn't even for a proper use of the talent. It was to suppress the talent from other organizations from succeeding. You got to ask yourself, was that good for the talent or was that good for the company? Well, I mean, for those that want to go and make a paycheck, sure. But they sacrifice themselves a bit for not being able to go and succeed like they normally do. They would normally do in independent rosters. But again, because of the pandemic, they've had some place where they can work. Now, I think once things normalize, once again, we get back to maybe some live shows and get back to events again, I would not be surprised. It's not going to happen at the start of 2021. But I want to say maybe summer of 2021, things will get back to a point where we'll start getting crowds once again all over the country because people will feel like, well, the vaccine's out there. People can travel now. People can start moving around. I think we'll start getting back shows socially distanced, but we'll start getting events once again. And venues will be able to go ahead and book, and we can have shows on the road. I really feel like WWE wants to get back to that really soon. They can only keep going with the Thunderdome concept until March, up until WrestleMania. And if they're able to successfully pull off a WrestleMania at Raymond James Stadium as planned, because when they didn't get to do it in Tampa this year, they're going to try to do it now next year. Even if it's socially distanced, if they can pull 20, 30,000 in the stadium, that's good for them. And that might be where they will decide, okay, we're going to get back on the road. We'll figure some way around. Do we want to do outdoor shows, go on the road? Something else? Because WWE is going to have to get a jolt in the arm somewhere. So if they go back out on the road and get audiences out, that might be the boost they need. And I'm telling you, it's not going to be for the creative end. I think Vince, and this is where Vince will be wrong, but Vince will say, well, this is what we got to do. This is the change that's going to make the difference on the ratings. If we're back on the road again, if we're back out with audiences to watch us again, and people can watch the shows like they are, and they can respond as such, then that's going to probably be the boost in the arm that will get the show back in the 2 million viewers range once again. Because I think that's probably the card that Vince is waiting to play. I think that's what he's waiting for. He's going to be the first one, if anybody, that's going to try to get more shows out there in front of audiences. He's going to do that. If the NFL is already doing that in some venues, they're going to just start going to places where they can do it. Why not? I'm surprised they haven't done anything where they decided to go and do outdoor stadiums yet. I'm really surprised they haven't done that yet, when they could. Not now, but after WrestleMania, if they can get themselves into indoor arenas right away, they can go ahead and do socially distanced shows, most likely in Florida or in Texas, most likely, other places like that. They could take football stadiums and do something there and be able to pull that off. And again, when there's no football, no baseball, no other things in some of these bigger venues, if they're willing to say, hey, well, yeah, go ahead and come on over, we'll let you do that, Georgia, Mercedes-Benz Stadium, it might not be the crowd that will fill that stadium, but if there's some kind of deal where somebody will say, hey, WWE, we want you to get some shows over here. Let's just start trying to pick back up the live crowds again. We'll give you the stadium to use. They could very well do that. I don't know if it would be detrimental for them or if it would work, but after they do the deal with the Thunderdome going over to the baseball stadium, Tropicana Field, they're going to have to figure something out. Because at the moment, Tampa's already working on things where, they already have the basketballs or the hockey stadium being used now for Raptors basketball. And then the Tampa Bay Devil Rays will be wanting to go back to their field pretty soon in March. So the residency in Orlando's done. They move over to Tampa. After that, I don't see the Thunderdome model continuing forward after that. I don't. And then I kept talking about NXT, and I remember talking about Karrion Kross and Matt Riddle breaking through the corporate creative bubble. Well, that was back in June. And look at how quick Matt Riddle became really irrelevant. He's now a joke character, more or less. It didn't take any time for him and for Keith Lee to be made into rubble. Just be destroyed. And at what cost to the company? Think about that. Now, there's so much more that we'll talk about next week, because I think we're already coming up to the hour. I want to go ahead and stop right here and just make my point across. There's so much more we're going to be able to talk about when it comes to part 5. That means we'll be going into Backlash. Bruce Pritchard coming back in charge once again of the creative, the yes man to Vince McMahon, the guy that has really, really escalated and has, really pushed forward on the Raw side, the continued decline. But how much is it also Vince? Because we're also hearing from people the same thing where Vince is also very much responsible for all this in the same vein as always. And then the sexual assault. Okay, the speaking out. We'll go back to that story. Remember that in June? The summer of speaking out. That was just crazy. Joey Ryan, Marty Scurll, Dave Christ, all in the mess of this. Remember that? And then we'll go through the whole part of that. Then we have everything else that's going out. Okay, you got Slammiversary and all the stars that were laid off being brought over to Impact Wrestling, the Horror Show at Extreme Rules, and the Eye for an Eye match. Oh my God. And the continued decline really comes into July and August, and we were chronicling that all the way through. Then the Thunderdome. And then we just keep going from there. So there's so much more left to go and talk about. Another 6 months worth as we get to that. But again, we'll come back to where it was with Backlash, which is where we'll come back when we go ahead and get back to the show again, June 14th. We'll get back to that point, and then we will go ahead and complete the rest of the year in review here on the Wrestling Observer Podcast. we'll talk about it like that. So anyway, as I go and close this show out, I want to wish all of you a very Merry Christmas. I hope everything goes well. Get some great gifts. I have my Christmas gifts wrapped. I look over to my left, and I just said to myself, those are horribly packaged, but I bought my stuff on Amazon. I got the boxes. I was like, oh, you know what? I'll just wrap the boxes this time. No gift bags, no cards. We're just going to do it like that. Let's see what happens. It was something that I tried. Well, did it work great? Not necessarily, but why not? So anyway, that's what it is. That's what we do. Also, take a look at the website, wrestlingisreal.com. I don't plug the website enough, but wrestlingisreal.com. You go there, you'll find a lot of things about the show. I've changed the whole look of it up. So when you go to the website, it's all on one page, basically. You go there, you'll see the latest episodes of the program. The latest newest episodes will be right there for you to go and listen to and catch at your leisure. Then you can also find where you can subscribe to the show. I'll have the latest wrestling headlines there. Top 5 that come from Fightful.com because I just decided to pick up their RSS feed. All the links to subscribe to the show, which is Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Stitcher, among others. And also where you can follow the show. I always post on Facebook. You can also find the YouTube version of the show. I'll post those episodes over on Facebook.com/WrestlingIsReal. Also, I have all my content, when it comes to all my podcasts. If you want to just find it in one place, I have it on YouTube. Now, it's not something you can watch. Like, there's a visual component. It's just there. An audio component, so you can also catch it there. YouTube.com/JBRASCO951. I'm going to ready to go and put the link to the YouTube right there on the website. So you'll have that once you go ahead and check the show for yourselves. So we'll have that too. So we're going to leave it there. Thanks for listening in. I hope you enjoyed the new microphone. It sounds great. I love it. I hope you do too. And until next week, come back for another Wrestling Is Real podcast. Merry Christmas, because wrestling needs us.
Thank you for listening to the Wrestling Is Real podcast. Follow the King of Podcasts on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and on Facebook at Wrestling Is Real. Subscribe to the Wrestling Is Real podcast through all major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Spreaker, and iHeartRadio. You can also look for episodes on his YouTube channel, youtube.com/JBRASCO951. You can find all this information and more by going to the website, wrestlingisreal.com.